This is Nan McKay, and today we are honored to be in the company of Dr. Sara Hart. She's a dynamic change agent who's sparking a transformative movement aimed at redefining how society perceives and interacts with senior women. With a rich tapestry of experiences spanning from leading training for a Fortune 100 company to championing women in technology, Sara combines her vast experience with a fierce dedication to uplifting senior women. As we delve into her journey, the Prime Spark movement, and her insights on leadership, get ready for a compelling conversation filled with groundbreaking ideas and heartfelt wisdom. So welcome, Sara.
Thank you, Nan. I'm delighted to be here.
Sara, could you start by sharing with us some of the inspiration and mission behind your initiative, Prime Spark, and what was the catalyst that prompted you to launch this movement?
I'd be happy to do that, Nan. I think that the final straw was I didn't get terrific treatment in a doctor's office. And it was because of my age, maybe my gender too, but certainly my age. And I left and thought that can't keep happening. That just can't keep happening. Medical science is not paying attention to women very much, period, and certainly not to older women. And that's not okay. So at that point, I was working with a coach and I said, okay, I know what I want to do next. I want to work with and on behalf of older women. And she said, oh, your golden years. And I said, oh, no, not your golden years. I want to work with women in their prime, in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And I want to help them find that spark deep inside that will ignite them into the next period of their life. So I thought, oh, that's interesting, that spark in the prime of their lives. That's their prime spark. And that's where it came from.
Well, you have an impressive background in leadership development, and you've held significant roles in major corporations and institutions. How have these experiences informed or maybe shaped your perspective on the treatment of senior women in the professional world?
Oh, man. When I first started, and we're talking about a lot of years ago now, I was the only woman, oftentimes in meetings that I went to. And I was in HR. And so, this is significant. As time passed, there certainly were more women. I was in an organization that was the sciences. And so we were talking about chemists and biologists and IT people. And so more and more women were hired, but initially there just weren't very many women. And many times I would go to meetings professional meetings outside of work, or meetings with the company in other locations and so forth. And there would be a room full of men and me. And I was never mistreated. But I never really felt part of it either. And this was way before we had any consciousness about this. I didn't realize how much not a part of the groups I felt. They would play poker. I don't like to play poker. They would go to the bar. I'm not a big bar person. They would go out for golf, and I can hit the ball, but I'm not a very good golf player. And so I think a lot of that time actually was pretty lonely, but we didn't really think about it then. And as I say, I was never mistreated. But One of the things I want is for women to always feel part of the group they're in, always listen to, paid attention to, if they're saying something that's worth listening to. But the number of times that I have observed, and everybody talks about this, but it's true, I've seen it so many times. In a meeting, a woman will say something and nobody will pay very much attention. And then a man will say pretty much the same thing. And it's, oh, what a good idea. And that gets more so with age. And I think that is getting worse, because I've talked to young women now, for me, young women in their 40s, and they feel sometimes belittled because of their age. So in their 40s, let alone their 50s, 60s, 70s. And so that's just, that's just not okay. It's not okay for the women, and it's not okay for the organization, because the organization is losing so much potentially fantastic information and knowledge and experience. And at a time when organizations can't find enough workers, here are all these experienced older people, men and women, but women bore the brunt of the layoffs during COVID and are bearing the brunt of not being able to get back in. And this is all not okay. And so, I have a long history of watching what happens inside organizations, and I can see this so clearly, and that's got to change.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, because of course I have sometimes felt the same way. Let's turn it this way so we can kind of talk to each other about this. I think you're right in that I think it's worse as women get older, because we are not only facing the gender types of discrimination, in a sense, ignoring us, which is in a sense discrimination, but we also are fighting almost like we're being invalidated. Is that the right word?
Yeah, it's very much the right word. Yeah.
And the question is not whether it's happened that much before, and we've overcome it. The question is really what's happening today. And do you feel like perhaps we're going back to where we were to some degree?
That's an interesting question, man, because as many of us did, I went through the 60s and 70s women's movement. And the years after that, and until the last, say, 5 to 10 years, I have felt that we were making progress. We weren't there, but I have felt we're making progress. But I do feel at this point that we're sort of going backwards. And I don't know that we'll be back to the 50s, twirling around in our kitchen and our crinolines, happy with our refrigerator. I don't think we'll go back to that. But I do think that in this very difficult time we're living in, women's rights are being taken away and being ignored to an extent that I don't think it was true before.
Do you also feel that women are viewed more and more, and accepting the view, as social objects, in a sense, sexual objects, I should say, in the sense of the clothes, the high heels, the emphasis on looking sexy? Do you think that, it's hard to have that image and also be taken seriously in the boardroom?
Well, I don't know. When that is how younger, successful women look now. And when I think what you just said, I think I'm out of date. I am out of date. So I don't know. I don't think, I mean, from what you just said, in a sense, it's making the belittling or the ignoring or the discounting our fault.
Some piece of it, if you buy into it, perhaps that's true. And
Well, but if, I mean, it's sort of, if I wear sexier clothes and very high heels, it's my fault if I'm not taken seriously. Really? I don't know that follows.
it shouldn't. It really shouldn't. I don't know that I want to link it that tightly. I think it's more the feeling that we have the projection of the image of what will be success if we do such and such. And it seems like it's a lot wrapped up in how women look, not how they think, not how smart they are, not how good at ideas they are, but the factor of impressions and the factor of how people are taken seriously or not, I think somehow is impacted. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that, I mean, unquestionably, in my opinion, unquestionably, women are, from a very early age, rewarded for how they look, how they dress, whether or not they're sexy, whether, all of that, we know all that. We know all that. And so my concern is when that all starts to fade, then the how much a woman in the workforce is worth begins to fade.
That's an interesting point.
That's the part that concerns me. So when I get to the point of my hair starts getting a little gray, I'm probably in menopause because I have these sweats and everybody can see what's happening to me. Things that didn't used to be saggy are starting to get a little saggy. You wouldn't call me sexy anymore. I can't even have babies. What am I worth? So if so much of a woman's worth is tied up with how she looks, then when all of that starts to fade, so does the worth of the woman in a lot of people's eyes. That's what concerns me.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective because on one hand, women should have the right to look any way they want. And if they feel that society is saying that this, whatever that is, looks good, then I should have the right to be able to look like that if I want to. I think what we're talking about, one thing we're talking about are the consequences of the action or the reason for it or what's precipitating it over here, and the result over here being as you age, if that's the value that you were that was placed on you for any reason, is that still the same value that you're going to get when you lose that exterior shell?
And I think in many cases now the answer is no. I mean, and I think back when I was in corporate, and in the time that I was there, some friends of mine and I laugh about this and bemoan the days we got up and put on pantyhose and a shirt and a jacket and a little tie. And the more we looked like the men that we worked with, the easier it was to be in the workplace.
And that was a costume in a way,
that was the costume.
you know, and
Yeah.
maybe what people are saying today is, well, that's the costume. But I think it's hard to be taken seriously sometimes if that perception is there on this side, because people should be valued for their mind and their actions and their accomplishments. And I don't know that we have that freedom. Do you think we do?
Oh, well, that's, huge across the board. No, I don't think so. I think that's also true for men, but it's much more true for women. And Nan, just to get back to what we were talking about before, I think that when I was working, the expectation were that I would dress the way I just described. I think the expectation for how younger, successful women dress now is different.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I don't know if they're perceived to be dressing overly sexy, and so how should I value her? Or if that's the dress expectation now, as compared with a little jacket, a shirt, and a tie.
That's the costume, maybe today.
Yeah,
Yeah, it could very well be.
yeah. I wonder about that. I mean, I think every once in a while when I get my knickers in a real twist about how much time everybody's spending on their cell phone or whatever, I think, and they're, people aren't going to be able to have face-to-face communication, and they don't understand that. And why can't they even write cursive, and on and on and on? I think, Sarah, get a grip, you know.
Well, let's talk about this thinking part. We've said people should be valued for their thoughts and their accomplishments. And the idea of creating thinking environments is really quite intriguing. Could you elaborate on what this entails for you and how it's really crucial in today's fast-paced society?
Yes, Nan, thank you. Yeah, I do a lot of thinking environment work. And if anybody is interested in that, you should look at the website timetothink.com. The work was developed by a woman in the UK. She's American, but she married a British man and lives there. And it's brilliant work. The basis of the work is any action we take is only as good as the thinking we do before. Which sounds like a duh. But in our fast-paced world, how many times do we sit down and really think through what we're about to do? Not very often. We just do it. And in my work with teams and organizations, which I don't do very much anymore, but it used to be, I used to watch over and over and over again. We don't have time to do all that, Sarah, but they have time to do it over and over and over when it didn't work.
When it didn't work.
So that's the basis of it. The idea is to help people think really, really well and for themselves. What do you really think about this? I am biased by this work, of course, but I cannot think of a time in history, in my history, when we more needed people thinking for themselves. And so I think the work is so important right now. And what we have found is, if that's so important, if thinking really well and for yourself is so important, how do we help people think really well? I wasn't taught to think. I was taught to speak. I was taught to write. I was taught to do things, but I wasn't really taught to think. And so what we have found is that one of the main things that determines how well somebody thinks is how they're treated while they're thinking. So is there good attention? Is there equality? Is there a felt equality? Is there appreciation? So there are 10 of those, we call them components in a thinking environment. And if some of those are present, thinking will be better. If they're all present, thinking will be absolutely as good as it can be. So when we learn the processes, we learn to give really, really good attention, to give appreciation, to demonstrate equality. So with all of the components. And the work sounds very simplistic, and it is very hard for most of us to do, because in the thinking environment, we never interrupt. And if we think about most conversations, we are interrupted all the time. I don't need to pick on them, but a lot of studies have been done on interactions with doctors, medical doctors. And then when they're asked, how long do you let a patient talk before you interrupt? They'll say, several minutes. I let them talk. I want to hear what they, and when it's measured, the actual time is something like 12 seconds. And so if you really want somebody to think for themselves, you can't interrupt. You can't even ask really good questions, because even really good questions are guiding. And so in the thinking environment, we don't ask questions. The only question we ever ask is, what do you want to think about? And what are your thoughts? And then what more do you think or feel or want to say?
So would you say it's strategic thinking, or would you label it in any way, or just is that
I wouldn't. It's your individual best thinking, and whether it's strategic or creative or something else sort of depends on what you want to think about.
That's a good point.
I want to think about the strategy for the next team meeting, or I want to think about coming up with a really creative idea for the project. So the kind of thinking, as I say, I think sort of depends on what the person wants to think about.
Good point.
They are invited to think about anything they want.
Well, your role as executive director of the Institute for Women in Technology, it must have provided some real unique insights. Can you share some of those challenges and successes that you encountered in advocating for women in such a male-dominated field?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the real focuses of the Institute, was to try to get more women in technology. And that has been a goal for years, and it's not changed. It doesn't change. The numbers don't change, and the effort that goes into it goes up and up and up and up, and the numbers don't change. So I don't. Anyway, we won't get into that. Well, it was sort of a circuitous route that it took to my being the executive director of that institute, because brilliant woman, Anita Borg, was the founder of the Institute. She was one of the very, very first top women in IT. And she was a wonderful, wonderful woman. She started the Institute for Women in Technology. And she hired me actually to come in, and she wanted the Institute and all the work to be a thinking environment. So that's why I started working with the Institute. And then very sadly, she died. And before she died, asked me if I would be the executive director, and I didn't want to do it. But I couldn't say no, so I did it. It was hard because I'm not a technical woman, and all of the women in the Institute were technical women. And then there's me, and I'm not a technical woman. I mean, I know how to turn on the computer, but if it doesn't happen, it doesn't. I don't know what to do. And so it was really hard. And I saw myself as sort of a interim, because I knew that we didn't want this permanently. So one of the things that was most fun was that we had workshops for college-age women all over the United States. And so we went to big universities all over the United States. And we had workshops using the thinking environment with women who were in the very beginning of their IT career. And so in the workshop would be these women. There would be administrators, women administrators, and faculty from the college and university. And then there would be women from the community. Some group would be chosen. And in one case, there was like a battered women's shelter. In another case, it was disabled people, handicapped people. And so there was some group chosen, and they would come and they would talk about what kind of technology would be helpful to them. Because our goal was to not make it faster, cuter, with more bells and whistles, but to make it useful. And to make it useful, we needed to know what they wanted. So we would have all these wonderful ideas, and we would decide on, through a whole process of using thinking environment, we would decide on 3. And then the young women students would take those back to their course for the semester and design them. And so, for example, one of the things that they designed was an automatic vacuum cleaner, way before that, whatever you call that thing is now. That thing that runs around by itself and scares cats.
The robo thing.
Robo, yeah. So they thought that a long time. This was years ago when they came up with that. In the handicapped group, one of the things they thought of, for example, and worked on, was having jackets with heaters, because the people, they had their joints hurt, and especially in the cold. So there would be heaters. So it was all sorts of stuff, and it was really fun, and it was helpful because we actually designed and built things that worked. So that was probably the most rewarding part of being there. I just loved it. It was not rewarding, not seeing the numbers for women in technology go up, but this work was very rewarding.
Well, it sounds like it was. And you do see women making strides today. I've got several that I've interviewed on the podcast and YouTube channel. Kitty Cheney Reed comes to my mind, but we still need more. We still need more. As an author of 3 books, could you give our listeners a glimpse into the core themes that you explore in your writings, and kind of what do you hope readers take away from your work?
Oh, thank you, Nan. The first book was I wrote years ago, and it's out of print now, but it was Introduction to Interpersonal Communication. And it was really a fun book to write because it had a lot of pictures that showed body language and people in settings and so forth. And that book, my intention, I really wanted, I had been asked to write that book for the Communication 101 in one of the universities in New York. And so it was meant to be the beginning textbook, but it was really fun. And I wanted it to be a fun book that students would learn a lot from and have fun with. That I wanted them to learn a lot and have fun with it. The second book I wrote is The Upside of Downsizing, Getting to Enough. I went through a major downsizing of my home 6 years ago now. And it was hard. It was really painful. So I started writing about it, thinking maybe that could help. And while I was writing, I thought, maybe this would be helpful to other people, because it's about the emotional side of downsizing your home, not the practicality. So it doesn't talk about, box this up and take it here and box this up and take it here. It talks about, what does it feel like to get rid of things you've had for many years and don't have any street value, but have deep intrinsic value. They may be things that were in your family. I had some things, for example, that my mother had made. I ended up with all the family pictures, and I couldn't take them all, and so I had to throw most of them away. And so it's a book that really I hope helps people when they're downsizing their home, because it's painful. I know I've done a lot of book readings, and I know that a lot of people who are getting ready for a major downsizing have been in their homes 30, 40, 50 years, and they have accumulated so much stuff that's valuable to them. That's hard. My third book is Prime Spark, Women Over 55, It's Our Time. And it's a workbook. It has 30 questions. And the best way to use that book, I think, is to get a group of women together and go through a chapter a week, whenever or however often you meet. And there are 5 questions in 6 chapters. So meet for 6 weeks, use each chapter, and have each woman answer the question for herself and then come and discuss it. So
that sounds like a great idea. I
yeah.
totally agree with you. And I think there's another aspect of this too. On your second book, when you're talking about downsizing. Part of the angst, I think, or sadness, or I'm not sure what you call it, that a lot of us, I think, have today is these things that we valued so much, nobody wants.
Right.
You know, I think, for instance, in my way back growing up years, Lennox China was a big thing. You know, we had what was that thing called? Where you put everything aside when you were going to get hope chest. That's what it was. You had the hope chest, but no one could imagine. I mean, what you did was embroider pillowcases. No one could imagine that you would be, getting Lennox China. But every year for my birthday, I asked for 1 plate. So I have some beautiful Lennox China. I don't know what's going to happen to it. It's not anything, but I valued it so much. It's like, and it was costly, but that doesn't seem to matter today because people are like, well, I really don't have any room for it. Well, I don't really entertain like that. Right?
Yeah, I when I do my talks on the book, I say, if you're saving things for your kids, don't. Because they don't want your china, they don't want your silver, they don't want your crystal, they don't want your linen, they don't even want the table that it went on. And good luck getting rid of that stuff now.
Yeah, you give it to Goodwill and people think, well, it's just, I have to polish silver? Are you kidding me?
Are you kidding me?
Polish silver? I mean, do that.
We have a totally different lifestyle now. I mean, people just don't live that way. And in fact, people our age don't even live that way. I was just talking to someone before we came on about how we used to go to each other's houses all the time for dinner. And there, somebody would cook a big meal, the table would be all set. And I don't know if that stopped with COVID or if it had already stopped. But most of the time now, we agree to meet out and go out.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure it was COVID, although that could have been some of it. I think it's just a more casual lifestyle. Maybe that's a result of COVID as well. But a casual lifestyle, I mean, I still have the dining room. I still have the hutch. I still have all my dishes in there. And I like to have people over. But, when so many of us have relocated, like I relocated from Arizona where I used to do that, and San Diego before that where I used to do that. And now up here, A, I don't know anybody. And B, if you did that, it's almost like you'd set the stage for them maybe feeling that they had to do it in return. And maybe they don't have that kind of stuff that they've saved. I don't know. It just doesn't seem to be important to people anymore.
I think the only time that it works, and I don't think it works, but last year I decided for some reason, and please, the next time I decide this, somebody stop me, that I wanted to cook Thanksgiving dinner. And so I spent the entire day and evening cooking, cleaning, eating, and cleaning up and putting away. And it was fun, but oh Lordy, if I ever do that again, I hope somebody hauls me off, because I used to do that. And I don't want to do that. That is exhausting, And I don't think it's just that I'm older. It just seems like look what I could have done with all that time.
Well, and it's little things like the china that you have may have a silver rim, and we were taught not to put that in the dishwasher, that you had to do it by hand. And besides that, it might break your china. So, and it was $50 a plate. You didn't dare do that. So therefore, you don't use it as much because of that kind of stuff too.
I have to wash this by hand. You're kidding
Yeah,
me.
you're kidding me. The realm of coaching, let's talk about that a minute. It's really vast and varied. When you mention coaching women change agents dedicated to bettering the world, what specific challenges do you think that they might face, and how do you tailor your approach to address them?
That's a great question, Nan. I think that for many of us, the major challenge we face is internal. Many of us buy into, because it is omnipresent in our society, buy into the fact that I'm too old to start doing that kind of thing. Who do I think I am? I'm in my late 50s, I'm in my 60s, I'm in my 70s, I'm in my 80s. You're kidding me. I can't do that. I'm too old to do that. So, and some, I mean, the saddest thing I run into are women who have spent a lifetime as a homemaker, taking care of a home and children, and usually a spouse, and oftentimes an extended family. They've taken care of the calendars, maybe 3 or 4 calendars. They have done everything. They've been on countless boards and committees, and now they feel like they don't have any skills. And I think, look at what you've done. Look at what you've organized and run. Look at your financial ability. Look at your team building. Look at, so it's for women who have not been in the workplace, it's that. For women who have been, it's a fear of trying to do things outside the organization. I know when I left the organization I'd been in, I was terrified, because my whole life I'd been taken care of by my parents, by the college, by my graduate school, by the university where I taught, by my employer for all those years. And now it's me. Oh my gosh. And so the biggest hurdle initially, and it can last, is internal. And after that, one of the big hurdles is, even though, in my opinion, it's working for them, many women do not want to think or talk about getting older. I run into women who've gotten really mad at me for wanting them to think about what it's like being an older woman. I don't want to be an older woman. I'm not going to be an, well, I suppose then you want to die. I try not to say that, but if I'm being sort of naughty, I will say that. So you run into women who don't want to think about it. You run into women who think they don't have any skills. You run into a society that thinks that you're worthless, that you're old. You're doing what? And so the hurdles are many, 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 but they're worth facing, because there's never been a time when older women's wisdom, experience, and skills is more needed than right now. And we have to get to women, older women, and convince them that if they're not now, they need to figure out what is most important to me. What am I most upset about right now? What would I most like to see a change in? And how can I make a difference in that thing? Even a tiny difference. A difference. Just go out and make a difference. And you're going to face pushback because you're old and maybe you don't have any experience in whatever it is important to you, but you do have a lot of experience in doing something, and you can make a difference.
And I think so much of it is mindset.
Yeah.
You know, if you think you're old, you are.
Right.
If you think you can't do it, you
Yeah.
can.
Right.
So we have to think about how we're being perceived. I don't like to be treated like I'm old. If somebody says, well, dear, you know, like calls me dear as a salesperson, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I do it all.
Flight attendant the other day called me honey.
Yeah, or honey or dear, and or
Dear
sweetheart, or
honey.
you know, you just want to smack them. But you know, it's not that you don't know you're old or that you're not acknowledging the years. I mean, the years are the years. What it is, what is. But I think the thing that I hate most is for someone assuming that I can't do something just because I'm a certain age. You know, I just don't accept that. I'm like, that's ridiculous. But it's a mindset.
It is a mindset.
That's a mindset.
That's why the biggest hurdle, I think, is internal for most of us. Not
I think that's true. You know, I can sit back and say, well, you know, yeah, I'm old. You know, this hurts and that hurts, or you know, I better not go out and do this or that. Well, what are you waiting for? Are you gonna sit around and wait to die? You know, you might as well get out there and do what you can do while you can do it. When you can't do it anymore, then don't do it. But I'm not at that point.
Exactly right.
Well, we are breaking those molds, right?
Yes, we are.
Well, lastly, we can't help but mention, I think it's Mr. Boo.
Mr. Boo. Oh, Mr. Boo, my wonderful kitty cat.
And then how has having a pet influenced or enhanced your life and work? And think especially in the context of the themes that you advocate for.
Right. Well, this is somehow he's influenced my life. This is a bookmark, Lessons I Learned from Mr. Boo, my cat. So there are 12 life lessons here that he taught me. So that's one way. He is 17. That's old for a cat.
That is very old for a cat.
It's very old for a cat. And he has a disease, and it sort of affects him, but he doesn't know it does. And so far as I can tell, he's not in pain. He does everything he's ever done. As far as I can tell, he still enjoys life. He loves to be combed. He loves to sit in the sun. He sleeps most of the time. I mean, who wouldn't like that, you know? And so I'm learning from him, in addition to my 12 life lessons, that you can live any way you want to at whatever it is. It's your choice. Now, there are people who have big physical problems.
Yeah.
That is definitely a given. And I see those people, a lot of those people, and it is still the case that how they live is a lot dependent on their attitude.
That's true. That's true. And it's not accepting the consequences. Oh, not the consequences. I'm not saying it right, but it's not accepting the negativity of what they're going through any more than they have to.
Right.
Is that kind of it?
Yeah, I mean, this is happening to me and I hate it.
Yeah.
And it hurts, or I can't do all this stuff anymore, or whatever it is. I'm not saying that it doesn't affect me, but I'm going to get on with it anyway. That's the way it is.
Me too.
I'm going to live my life to the fullest, to the extent I can. And it may be very limited now as compared with what I had hoped, but it is still what I can do.
Well, tell our audience where they could get in touch with you, how they could participate in what you're doing, give them and are your books available on Amazon? So
Yes,
tell us a little
yes.
bit about that.
The two books, the Prime Spark, Women Over 55, It's Our Time, and The Upside of Downsizing, Getting to Enough. Both of those are available on the site, on Amazon. The first one isn't available anywhere anymore. Well, I've got a handful of copies on my bookshelf, but you can't buy it anywhere. The best way is, well, just to get as much information as you want about Prime Spark, is to go to primesparkwomen.com.
Okay, women.com.
Primesparkwomen.com. That's got all the information. And you can sign up there if you want to be on the email list. You'll get the newsletter that goes out once a month. And that is about the only time we'll bother you. I don't send a lot of emails, so you don't have to worry about getting bombarded. If anybody wants to just get in touch with me, then they should just send an email to me, Sara Hart, SaraHart. So both names are as simple as they can be, at Hartcom, HARTCOM.com. So Sara Hart at Hartcom.com. I named Hartcom before the .com era. So Hart is my last name, and com was communication, commitment, and community.
All right.
And then the .com era came in. So then it had to become Hartcom.com. So if talk about redundancy, Sara Hart at Hartcom.com.
Well, that sounds great. Thank you so much. It's been so much fun talking with you. Is there anything else you'd like to add, or are you okay?
No, thank you, Nan. I love your work. Thank you. And thank you for talking to this time together. It was really fun.
Thank you.